In order to have effective training programs that help us achieve the goals we want, we typically apply what is known as the principles of training. It's a fairly dry framework. I'll try to go through them as quickly as possible. But these are basically what govern writing a good training program. According to different frameworks, there's different principles. In junior high, you may have looked at the FIT principle: frequency, intensity, type and time. For the purpose of this assignment, we're going to look at individuality, overload, specificity, reversibility, variation and recovery as the main principles of training. We'll also briefly mention periodization, but this is not one you can do in a 6-week program effectively. The first principle is individuality, and this basically looks at you. It looks at the goals and makes sure that the program that you've written targets the goals. It looks at that the program improves or gets more difficult at the rate that you improve. Also looks at your strengths and weaknesses, so you're not going to spend all your time training what's already strong, but rather you're going to target your weaker areas. So put very simply, the training program has to meet your needs, your goals, your weaknesses, and change at a rate that suits you. The next principle of training we're looking at is overload, and this basically means that your training program has to put a load on your body. So your body has to get stressed and find it difficult to meet those challenges. So it could be heavy weights, could be trying to run faster, could be trying to run for longer. They're all different ways we can change the load. What our body adapts to this change in load, and that's how we become stronger and fitter. So as our program goes on over the weeks, we should see the intensity, the weights get heavier, the length that we're running get longer, or the frequency or the sets and reps increase in number. Basically, if we put a load on our body adapts to make itself stronger and cope with that load, and then we need to let it recover, and then we keep that cycle going, and that's how we get fitter. Typically, we try to increase about 10% per week. Some important considerations when applying the principle of overload to your program is that you should commence your program slowly. Obviously, it's got to match where you're at already when you start. Should have no sudden increases, but gradual increases. As I mentioned, about 10% a week, roughly. Some people quicker, other people a little bit slower. You should cycle through hard and easy sessions. So if you have up the load or up the weights, up the distance, you should probably have an easier session afterwards to recover. And you need to allow for about 48 to 72 hours between hard sessions. The next principle is periodization, and this is particularly important if you're going to do like a year-long program. You might have an off-season after the competition to let your body recover and you do a little bit less. Then you slowly start to work into a pre-season where you might build your aerobic fitness and your coach gets you to do lots of jogging and just improve your overall endurance. And then we start to target specific things, and typically originally we might target strength. Once we've developed some strength, we can work on our power and our speed, and then during the actual season we might actually just be targeting to maintain all that and not try to have massive improvements, because if we do try to get too many improvements we might injure ourselves and not be able to perform very well in the matches. So during the season it's typically just a maintenance phase, and then that cycle continues on a year-long basis. In this diagram you can see what a typical training program for a professional athlete might look like, be it an AFL player, basketballer, even a freestyle BMX rider. It's all pretty much the same, and we don't have to worry about periodization in this assignment because we're only writing a program for 6 weeks, which would really only target one of these little areas, not even being a quarter of a year. The next program is Specificity, and it basically means that the training that we do has to meet the needs of our goals or the competition we're training for. We have to use the movement and energy systems that are relevant to our goals. We have to target the specific components of fitness that are relevant to our competition or to our goals. They have to have similar intensity and work intervals. It could even be in a similar environment. If we're practicing our free throw shots in a very controlled, closed, quiet environment, and then we need to shoot on the run in a noisy stadium, they may not transfer from one to the other. So this basically means we have to replicate our competition as much as we can in training, or at least if we're training for general fitness, make sure we're targeting the right components of fitness through the training that we do. The principle of reversibility, simply stated, is use it or lose it. Basically, if we get a long-term gain in our aerobic capacity or our muscular endurance by over time slowly running further and further and further, if we then stop that for a couple of weeks, it'll start to go backwards, so in order to prevent that loss, we have to make sure we put in a couple of sessions just to either maintain that or build it further. If you're going to have a couple of weeks where you're really going to look at your endurance, and then the next couple of weeks might do some more weight training and look at strength, then you've got to put at least 1 or 2 long distance runs in there as well, so you don't lose the benefits or the gains that you've made in your aerobic capacity and muscular endurance. So yeah, I guess even though you might not be targeting improvement, if you don't do any training in a specific area, you'll go backwards. The principle of variation now is really quite simple. Put a variety of stuff in your program. One of the biggest reasons programs don't work is people get bored of them and they quit, or they just don't follow them anymore. So make sure you put different activities, try to mix it up a little, maybe run in different locations, maybe do it with different groups or some by yourself. Also, if we do the same stuff very often, week in, week out, it can lead to injury. So not only does it help us keep us motivated, it also prevents injury. Our next principle is recovery, and this basically means we have to cycle our hard and easy sessions. So if we do a hard session with up some weights or we've gone for a long run, then we need to make sure our next couple of days are a little bit easier. Maybe we can even put in an active recovery session where we go for a jog or a swim or a massage, or we could do a passive recovery and have a full rest day and do nothing. You might also do recovery between sets, so if you're going to do a couple of 400-metre sprints, you might have to have a couple of minutes in between. During that time, you're probably good to walk or have a bit of a stretch to clear your lactic acid. Also, you might need to consider such things like matches or competition, that the day after your match or competition, you're doing some active recovery sessions.